33. Thank you, Senator, for joining us for our virtual legislative candidate meetings this morning. My name is Jina Ragland with AARP Nebraska, and joining me today is Susan DeCamp, Bob Lassen, and Danny DeLong, all AARP lead advocacy volunteers. AARP State President Dave Holmquist is also joining us, as well as Emily Wick from our state office. Senator Halloran, we appreciate your taking the time to meet and discuss issues of importance to the 50-plus voter and their families across Nebraska. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded and will be shared with AARP members across your district prior to the election. So, Senator, if you want to start us off by giving us a little background about yourself and your campaign, that would be great. And once we've completed your opening, we'll move into the questions. So the floor is yours, Senator.
Well, thanks for having me, and it's good to meet with you. I wish we could meet in person instead of virtually, but Zoom and COVID-19 and the masks and everything else and distancing, social distancing has taken over our world, whether we like it or not. So it's good to be with you. I am Steve Halloran, represent District 33, which is Adams County, and the southern and western part of Hall County, which I refer to as the best part of Hall County. Not to disparage Grand Island, but I've got the better part of Hall County. That being said, it's the questions that you're asking, and we'll give you a little background about myself. About 12 years ago, my wife and I lived in Billings, Montana. We grew up here in Hastings. I grew up here in Hastings. I'm a fifth-generation farmer, retired now. But we moved temporarily to Billings, Iowa, or Billings, Montana, excuse me, to manage a restaurant we had part ownership in. During that time, my mother had a stroke, and the question was, which is a question that many families have to address, so what do we do with mom, right? Well, she had been living in her home on the farm. Again, it's the farm that great-great-grandfather homesteaded. The home wasn't that old, but nevertheless, it was the home farm. And the question was, what do we do? So do we try to keep mom in our home, or do we take her to a long-term care facility or nursing home? And my 5 siblings, they didn't volunteer us, but we volunteered, but it was one of those things where, like in the military, when the sergeant asked for a volunteer, everybody else kind of stepped back and we were standing in the forefront, right? So we volunteered, and we did it. I'd like to say, I hope to say it was graciously volunteered, because we wanted to keep mom in her home, right? So we sold our home in Billings, and instead of moving mom out to Billings, which would be a move for her in a place that she wasn't familiar with, we moved into her home, which had all kinds of dynamics. You know, when you move into another woman's home, my wife, bless her heart, was a saint, and my mother was as well, for having to put up with another woman in the home making decisions for her, right? So, but we did that, and we did it for 9 years. We took care of mom until she got to a point where transitioning her from chair to chair and bed to chair and those kind of issues became more difficult because my wife and I were aging as well. And so we did move her to, she had another spell, another minor stroke, and we did have to move her to Good Samaritan Village, Perkins, and Hastings. And she was there for a little over a year and a half, and they took marvelous care of her, right? But I say all that as background because it's difficult for people to take care of their family members. We understand that. And but that being said, culturally, we don't have a culture that we used to have where that was not uncommon, right? Where the grandparents moved in with the family and took care of the grandkids if they could and helped around a little bit. But generationally, people took care of the older generation in their home. Well, we've moved away from that. I don't know how you shift that culture back. Probably won't be able to. So here we are, where we have a large number of people retiring and in need of some level of additional care. And so I wanted to give you that background so that you kind of have an understanding that we've been through some of that. A lot of families have. And again, it won't be comforting to you, but I don't have all the answers. You know, any person in politics that tells you that they've got the answers is deluding themselves and you as well, right? So, but I think almost everyone in politics, not universally, but almost everyone in politics at the state level, and I hope at the federal level, are willing to address the issues and questions that you put in front of us, willing to address them, but we have to be candid about the practical cost of doing all that, right? Social Security, when it started under Franklin FDR, there was roughly 41 workers for every beneficiary. That was a pretty good ratio. So a lot of people were contributing to Social Security for every one person that was retiring and benefiting from it. Now it's less than 3 to 1. It's not a good ratio. And so, you know, it's all about the money. And Congress, I just will point the fingers at somebody else besides me or the state legislature. But Congress has basically pirated a lot of the funds away from Social Security. We all know that. And so consequently, that creates a shortfall for people. They should be receiving more in Social Security than they are. But you know, the dynamics has been that Congress felt there was better need for the money somewhere else, and so they raided the fund on several occasions. And so you know, here we are. It always gets down to the money and how do we fund it, right? With that was more than 5 minutes lead-in time, but somebody should have rang the bell.
No problem, Senator. And thank you for sharing your personal stories. I think sometimes, I know listening to your stories, I know you hear a lot of personal stories too. So I think that always, again, it sometimes softens the issues and does help with that. So thank you for sharing your story. And most importantly, thank you for taking care of your mom in the capacity that you did, because not all families have that ability. So
well, right, and I have to say that you know, we benefited from that experience as well, right? My other 5 siblings didn't have the opportunity to do it in some respects, but they also didn't have the benefit of being with mom. So
absolutely, and that in itself, those are memories you can never take away. So thank you. So we'll now move into our questions. I know you've kind of touched on some of the questions individually already, but we'll kind of recap all of those. We've provided you with the set of the 3 questions, again, pertaining to 50 plus in Nebraska, allotting about 5 minutes for each of those questions if possible. Our first question will come from Dave Holmquist, again, our state president, and talking about helping people stay in their homes and communities. So go ahead, Dave.
Good morning, Senator, and thank you for being with us today.
Right.
A livable community is one that is safe and secure, has housing that is affordable, in other words, no more than 30% of income spent on housing, has transportation options that allow individuals to travel by multiple means, and has supportive community features and services for people of all ages, which allows people to remain in their communities as they age. What steps will you take to ensure that all Nebraskans have access to livable communities?
Well, that's not a very narrow question, but I appreciate it. Well, I mean, you know, it's every community is different. I can't speak statewide, but I can speak for the local communities in the district, and I think it's true of many districts. You know, the communities in my district are busting their butts to make every effort to transportation wise to be able to allow people to have some means of transportation, low cost transportation or no cost transportation. Housing is always an issue, whether it's low income housing for young people or for elderly. And that's an ongoing issue that how do you spur that kind of development? We don't see enough low-income housing, frankly, because honestly, from a contractor's perspective, it probably doesn't pay very well, right? And as benevolent as contractors would like to be, they're in it to make a living. And so those two issues kind of come at each other from opposing views, and so the argument might be, well, maybe the state needs to subsidize some of that. And the state can help out and has helped out with low-income housing in regards to income tax credits and those kind of issues. Ultimately, a lot of what kicks a lot of people out of their homes is high property taxes, right? And the states, and I'm part of the state government and legislature, we've done a miserable job of giving property tax relief to Nebraskans. We're like the 4th highest property tax state in the nation. And I don't want anybody to delude themselves to think, oh, it's not an issue. Every day someone's moving out of their home because they can't afford the property taxes, right? So that's incumbent upon the legislature to address that issue. We, I guess, have tried, failed grossly this last year, and we'll come back with some measure of a tax reform bill that reforms our whole tax structure, and frankly should free up a lot of money, and that's always the issue, free up a lot of money to place where it's more needed, such as your questions. But in the meantime, we need the public support. The legislature needs public support in reforming property tax, and that sometimes means calling your senator or calling your governor. Now, that wasn't a direct answer, but that's the issue we have to contend with. There's a lot of money that should stay in the hands of property owners so they can stay in their homes.
Thank you.
Senator. There's definitely a lot of overlap, and certainly appreciate your thoughts on that. Our second question will come from Susan DeCamp, and this is switching over into health, caregiving, and home and community-based care. So Susan, go ahead.
Good morning, Senator. It's nice to have you with us.
Good morning.
Caregivers help older persons live independently at home by providing assistance with activities like bathing, dressing, and performing medical and nursing tasks, such as administering medication and wound care. But caregivers often provide these services with little or no training and little or no pay. So with that in mind, I have a 2-part question. And if you thought the first question was broad, you're going to find this one probably even broader. So I'm going to ask the first part of the question, and after your answer, we'll go to the second part. Yeah. Will you support helping caregivers with things such as paid leave, respite services, telehealth, and access to education and training?
Well, that's pretty specific, so I appreciate the specificity on that. The paid leave becomes obviously a question that brings in employers, right? And then because you're asking employers to give time off paid to take care of a family member. And on the surface, I'm okay with that as long as, but I'm not much of an employer anymore, so I don't have to deal with giving that kind of paid leave. And again, I hate to answer a specific question with a broad answer, but part of the problem is that we don't have people generating enough income, high enough wages to or salaries to be able to afford to have one of the 2 people stay at home, husband or wife, doesn't matter, right? With the economy like it is, and we have to have, or the trend has been for some time, for both husband and wife to be working. And so, that's not an answer. That's not a solution that's going to happen quickly, but we have to have some improvements in the economy so people can simply afford to do those things. The paid leave should be a one-on-one relationship with the employer. state can mandate that. The state can pass legislation to cause that to happen. But that's you know, at some level, that's perceived to be pretty heavy-handed to increase paid leave for those kind of issues. Now, if it's paid leave, you know, I think the parties involved need to show evidence, you know, clear evidence that they're getting paid leave to do what they say they're going to do, and that's take care of a loved one at home. And it can't be semi-permanent paid leave, right? Otherwise, the employer is going to be having half-time people working, and they're going to have to replace that half-time worker. It takes paid leave. They're going to have to replace that or find a substitute for that worker. So sounds like a simple solution, and maybe there's a way to do that. So far, I haven't seen legislation that accommodates or addresses the question, if I take paid leave from my employer, what's my employer do in my absence, right? And right now, almost every employer I know is looking for more employees to fill jobs that they have now. So it's a dynamic question, and it's a dynamic issue, and there's no simple answer to it. But if legislation comes along, we'll have to look at it and address it when it does. But you know, it's as I started off, I warned you that I don't have all the answers.
Okay. The second part to the question is, how would you protect or expand paid services and supports, as well as financial security that allows more seniors to live independently in their homes and communities?
Protect and expand paid services and supports. Well, I'm not sure. Maybe you can expand on that. I'm not sure I understand the question.
One example might be by supporting the ADRCs, the Aging, Disability, and Resource Centers across the state. They provide services that help people, you know, call in with questions regarding being able to stay in their homes and community-based living. Another one, as far as a financial security, those kind of programs would be like the food security programs such as SNAP and the homestead exemption, which helps seniors, you know, live
Right.
here.
Well, you know, I'm fully supportive of the homestead exemption, but there again, that's back to the property tax issue. They shouldn't have had to deal with that as heavily as they've had to, paying property taxes at the rate they do. SNAP benefits, I think, you know, at some level, that's a little bit beyond my scope as a state legislator. That kind of falls more closely in realm to the federal. It's a federal issue, USDA. But you know, I think again, some of these, it's like politics is local. A lot of these questions or a lot of these issues can be very local as well, right? In how the local community addresses them. And how and that willingness for the local community to address it is a question of how much they're willing to pay up, right? I mean, it's you know, is a local community going to maybe have a bond issue to help with some of this? You know, that's a question that can come in front of the voter and they can decide. But again, culturally, I tend to look at the long term on this thing. I know there's a lot of very serious short-term issues, and you're asking those questions. I like to look at the long term, and we have to address those immediate questions that you're asking. They're serious questions, serious issues. The long term, what do we do so that it's not a problem 20 years out and 30 years out, right? Otherwise, we just keep chasing that. We keep chasing that problem, and it doesn't go away. Early on in the information you gave me, you talked about the number of elderly people relative to the number of children, right? Well, you may not be happy that I dragged this into the commentary, but you know, we have basically killed 50 million babies through abortion. Now, whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, the fact of the matter is that's 50 million people that are not working today, not alive to work, not working today, and help fuel the tax revenue to address some of the questions we're talking about. And so that ratio keeps getting worse and worse and worse, and we're compounding it by disallowing the number of children being born and becoming part of the communities that we're talking about to support the elderly population. It's like I mentioned earlier about the ratio of workers per beneficiary in Social Security. We need more workers. That ratio needs to be somewhere above 4 to 1, and we're well below, we're right at 2 to 1 now. So, you know, we just need to encourage, have more babies. But that's a long term, and some of us are beyond being able to do that, I understand. But
Senator, I think we'll go ahead and move on to our third question, just
Sure.
in the interest of time. And Bob Lassam will address that. And now we're kind of just switching to nursing facility quality. So go ahead, Bob.
Thank you for being here, Senator. An estimated 6,600 Nebraskans reside in one of Nebraska's 211 nursing homes. By 2040, the University of Nebraska Omaha projects that number will more than double to almost 14,000. Due to a variety of factors over the past few years, Nebraska has seen an increase in nursing facilities having to close and residents having to relocate elsewhere. How will you ensure that Nebraska residents receive quality nursing home by ensuring an adequate nursing home staff, which is one of the problems that they're having in these facilities, and that includes education and training. And the other part that seems like it's driving this closure is proper reimbursement. And this comes to where, like, Medicaid reimbursement rates for the states. And of course, you know, when they aren't where they're supposed to be, which has been a problem, that dries up private pay, you know, which isn't right either. So those two things are our final question: is the education of nursing staff and the proper reimbursement.
those are tough. I mean, that important issues, right? I mean, I became very close to the staff where my mom was in the nursing home, and it was pretty clear they were overworked and underpaid. There's no question about it. Recently, I was on a task force headed by Senator Friesen, where we went around the state and we looked at various nursing homes. Some of them you'd be very proud of. Most all the nursing homes in Nebraska you'd be very proud of. But we went to some that you wouldn't put your pet dog in it. I mean, it's you know, there are extremes in that regard, and that's not totally necessarily a question of that they weren't getting adequate funding. They were just mismanaged. So you're going to think this is a cavalier answer, and it's not meant to be. But for me, if you want me to address these issues, elect me to be governor, but I'm not running. Okay. And I say that because the governor has control. We write legislation. You know, we create oversight over Health and Human Services, Department of Health and Human Services, but ultimately the governor manages the department. And I'm not pushing that off on Governor Ricketts is not doing a good job. I don't care who's governor. The Department of Health and Human Services has gotten to a size and dimension that it's almost unmanageable. And we see the results, I think, of some poor management in that regard. Their oversight over these nursing homes should be a lot better. They don't visit them frequently enough. But here's their dilemma, right? So they find a problem. They find a problem in a nursing home that's a serious problem. And they give direction to that nursing home to fix it. But they might not come back for 6 months to see if they did. And so they come back in 6 months and they still haven't fixed the problem. So what's the remedy at that point? Well, they could shut them down. I mean, they have the authority to shut down a nursing home that's not living up to the standards they should. They can shut them down, but the dilemma that causes is, where do those residents go? Right? So we just need better oversight through Health and Human Services. I think we have adequate legislation governing it, but you got to administer. You got to administer the legislation to make sure it's working. Pay's not enough. I understand that. Competition for these people to go to hospitals is very attractive if they can, because the pay is better and the benefits are better. Medicaid's probably is no question about it. Medicaid is inadequately funded, just like Social Security is. And not to pass the buck, but call your congressman. Yeah.
Thank you, Senator. We're now getting to the end of our time and the end of the meeting. So I would like to offer you the last couple of minutes to offer any closing thoughts or comments that you might have, or messages you want to send to your constituents. So the floor is back to you for the final couple minutes. Go ahead.
Well, thank you again. And I apologize in hindsight that I might have filibustered more than necessary on some of those questions. It wasn't my intention to do that. You know, my constituents, I think, have understood when I ran for office the first time, and running again unopposed, and I'm fortunate in that regard. But I think people in my district understand that I ran on a certain level of principles, and I've worked very hard to try to live up to those principles. Now, there are some people that, Senator Ernie Chambers would suggest I was a handmaiden of Governor Ricketts, and I can assure people that he and I have a lot of conversations on various issues where we choose to disagree, and he respects my opinion and I respect his. But I'm grateful to be a representative of District 33. It's one of the best districts in the state. You can reverse the numbers, and it's the same both ways. So I encourage my constituents to contact my office, and they do, and to continue to do that. Contact my office with issues, and we'll direct them. A lot of the current issues, not related to the subject matter here, but a lot of the current issues deal with unemployment benefits and such. So we've been trying to have been working very hard with our constituents in remedying those issues.
Great. Thank you, Senator, so much for taking the time to visit with us. We wish you the best again with your campaign, and look forward to working with you in the legislature. Just a sidebar, thank you again for introducing your spoofing legislation. I know that's been impactful, and we look forward to any future endeavors we can work with you on that. So thank you again for meeting with AARP today.
And thanks for the support on that bill. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Senator.
Good to see you all.
Have a good one.
Have a good day.
You too.